What happens when a billionaire humiliates someone in a language he assumes no one else speaks? Marcus Whitmore, CEO of a $4.7 billion empire, walked into Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant with a $2.5 billion deal on the line. He treated the waitress like furniture, barking orders in French, never making eye contact. "Just a waitress," he muttered dismissively. But Sophie Bennett wasn't just a waitress. 3 years ago, she was Dr. Sophie Bennett, Director of International Communications at the UN, fluent in 9 languages, and the woman who refused Marcus Whitmore's $2 million bribe. The woman he destroyed with forged documents to protect his corrupt empire. When his interpreter canceled and his deal collapsed in mistranslations, Marcus never imagined the invisible woman in the black apron would save him or destroy him. This is the story of how 9 languages brought a billionaire to his knees. Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And if you like it, please hit the like button. The crystal chandeliers of Le Jardin Étoilé cast geometric patterns across white linen tablecloths, each shadow precise, as the Michelin 3-star rating mounted beside the mahogany host stand. Sophie Bennett moved through the dining room like water around stones. Present, essential, invisible. She'd perfected the art over 3 years. "Table 12 needs water," she murmured to Carlos, the sommelier, her voice barely audible beneath the string quartet playing Debussy in the corner. Her hands never stopped moving, adjusting a fork's angle by 2 degrees, removing a breadcrumb invisible to anyone else, refilling a wine glass before the guest noticed it was empty. The restaurant smelled of truffle oil and old money, leather-bound menus, and the particular perfume of people who'd never checked a price tag. Sophie had learned to move through it without disturbing the air, without leaving an impression. Just another pair of hands in a black apron. "Miss?" A woman at table 7 held up her champagne flute. "This is warm?" "My apologies, ma'am. I'll bring you a fresh glass immediately." Sophie's smile was professionally pleasant, the kind that never reached her eyes. She'd learned that too, how to smile without being seen, how to apologize for things that weren't her fault, how to make people comfortable with her servitude. She returned with the champagne, properly chilled, condensation already beating on the crystal, and the woman didn't look up from her conversation, didn't say thank you. Sophie hadn't expected her to. In the kitchen, she allowed herself 3 seconds of stillness, her hand unconsciously reaching for the small locket beneath her uniform collar. Inside was a photo of Daniel, her younger brother, grinning at 14 with braces that gleamed. That was 2 years before the diagnosis. 3 years before she'd lost everything trying to save him. "Bennett, table 9 needs their entrees." Chef Pierre's voice cut through her thoughts. Sophie grabbed the plates, duck confit, seared scallops, Wagyu beef prepared with the precision that justified the $400 per person price point. She delivered them with the same invisible efficiency, noting the small details other servers missed. The businessman at table 9 adjusted his Rolex 3 times in 2 minutes, nervous. The couple at 11 hadn't looked at each other in 20 minutes, anniversary dinner going badly. The regular at 6 ordered his usual Bordeaux but kept glancing at his phone, waiting for someone who wouldn't come. She saw everything. No one saw her. Sophie. Marcus, the maitre d', approached with his tablet, his expression carefully neutral. "VIP reservation just came in for tomorrow night. Private dining room. Party of 4. Of course. She'd worked 100 VIP dinners. They were all the same. More money, worse manners, better tips if you were lucky. The name's Whitmore. Marcus Whitmore. Sophie's hand froze halfway to adjusting a napkin. The crystal water glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, catching the edge of the table before she snatched it back. Water sloshed, but didn't spill. "You okay?" Marcus, the maitre d', frowned. "Fine." Her voice came out steady, despite the ice crystallizing in her chest. Yes, I can take that table." "You sure? It's high profile. The guy's apparently some billionaire CEO, bringing international clients. Chef wants everything perfect, I'm sure." The words tasted like ashes. Marcus Whitmore. 5 years. She'd known this moment would come eventually. New York wasn't big enough for both of them to stay invisible forever. But tomorrow night, in her restaurant, at her table, the man who'd destroyed her life was walking back into it, and he wouldn't even recognize her face. Sophie returned to the dining room, her movements automatic now. She poured water, cleared plates, smiled, without being seen. But her mind was cataloging details with the precision of her old life. The life before waitressing, before survival, before invisibility became armor. In her studio apartment that night, Sophie stood before her tiny bathroom mirror. Her reflection looked tired, 28 but aged by 3 years of double shifts and buried dreams. She opened the locket, staring at Daniel's photo beside the small embossed insignia she'd cut from her UN badge, the only proof she'd ever been Dr. Sophie Bennett. She pulled out the box from beneath her bed, the one she hadn't opened in 6 months. Inside were her credentials, her dissertation, newspaper clippings from before the fabricated scandal, before the deep fakes, before Marcus Whitmore had decided her integrity was worth less than his quarterly earnings. And beneath those, carefully preserved in a waterproof envelope, copies of the original emails, the bribe offer, the recordings she'd made when she'd first suspected what he was planning. Evidence she'd been too devastated to use when it mattered, too broken to fight back when he'd crushed her. Sophie closed the box. Tomorrow, Marcus Whitmore would walk into Le Jardin Étoilé expecting another invisible servant to pour his wine. He'd never imagined that the woman he'd destroyed had been setting his table for 3 years, waiting in the shadows he'd cast. She touched the locket once more, Daniel's face smiling up at her. The treatments he needed cost $180,000. She had $14,000 saved. Every day he got worse. Every day she stayed invisible. Until tomorrow. Tomorrow, she'd decided, Marcus Whitmore would finally see her. And this time, she wouldn't be the one who disappeared. Marcus Whitmore arrived at Le Jardin Étoilé at exactly 7:30 p.m., the kind of punctuality that demanded the world adjust to his schedule, not the other way around. Sophie saw him through the entrance glass before Marcus the maitre d' opened the door. 6'2", silver hair swept back like a corporate lion's mane, wearing a charcoal Brioni suit that cost more than she'd earned in 6 months. The Patek Philippe Nautilus on his wrist caught the chandelier light as he strode past the host stand without acknowledging the greeting. Behind him came his guests, a tall, severe man in his 60s with steel-rimmed glasses and a Swiss banker's posture, an elegant Chinese woman in her 40s wearing a burgundy silk suit that screamed tech money, and a distinguished Saudi gentleman in traditional thobe and bisht, his beard meticulously groomed. "Mr. Whitmore, welcome to Le Jardin Étoilé." Marcus the maitre d' extended his hand. Whitmore didn't take it. "The private room. We're expected." "No, please. No, thank you." Just the expectation of obedience. Sophie fell into position behind the group as they were led to the Rousseau room, Le Jardin's most exclusive private dining space, named for the massive original painting dominating one wall. The table was set for 4 with the restaurant's finest crystal and china, candles already lit, the air scented with white roses from the arrangement she'd personally positioned that afternoon. "Your server this evening will be Sophie," Marcus the maitre d' said. "She'll take excellent care of you." Whitmore's eyes passed over her without stopping, the way you'd glance past a coat rack. No recognition. 3 years of waiting, and he didn't even see her face. Water, still not sparkling. "And bring me your wine list." Whitmore settled into his chair, already turning toward his guests. "Herr Schneider, please sit. Ms. Chen, Sheikh al-Rashid, I think you'll find this venue appropriately discreet for our discussion." Sophie poured water, her hand steady despite the racing of her pulse. She was invisible again. Good. She needed to hear this. "The proposal," Whitmore continued, pulling out a leather portfolio, "involves the merger of Whitmore Global Holdings with your respective entities. Herr Schneider, your Geneva-based investment firm brings $800 million. Ms. Chen, your tech infrastructure provides $500 million in valuation. Sheikh al-Rashid, your energy portfolio, $1.2 billion. Sophie noted how none of them smiled. This wasn't a social dinner. This was $2.5 billion changing hands. "The documentation is, of course, complex," Whitmore said, accepting the wine list from Sophie without looking at her. "Multiple jurisdictions, various regulatory frameworks. That's why I've arranged for a professional interpreter." His phone buzzed. He glanced down, and Sophie saw the momentary tightness around his eyes. "Problem?" Herr Schneider's accent was thick, his English precise but clearly not his preference. "My interpreter." Whitmore's jaw clenched. "Car accident. She's in the hospital. Won't be able to make it." Ms. Chen exchanged a glance with Sheikh al-Rashid. "Mr. Whitmore, this is a $2.5 billion transaction. We agreed. All terms discussed in our native languages to avoid any misunderstandings. I speak French fluently, Whitmore said smoothly. And enough German for business. We'll manage. My English is functional, Sheikh al-Rashid said slowly, each word carefully shaped. But for legal specifics, for details of this magnitude, I must be certain I understand perfectly. In Arabic. And my Mandarin, Ms. Chen added, her English impeccable but her message clear, is how I think about numbers. Translations miss nuance. Sophie stood beside the water station, forgotten, listening. Whitmore's deal was crumbling before it began, and he knew it. She could see the calculation in his eyes. 5 years ago, she'd seen that same look when he'd weighed whether her refusal was a problem he could solve or eliminate. He'd chosen elimination. We'll work through it, Whitmore said, his voice taking on the commanding edge Sophie remembered from Geneva. I didn't build a $4.7 billion company by letting language barriers stop me. Now, shall we begin with the appetizers? The foie gras here is exceptional. He snapped his fingers at Sophie without looking. You, whatever the chef recommends, and bring the Chateau Margaux 2010. No, please. No acknowledgement she was human. Just a waitress. Sophie took the order to the kitchen, her mind calculating. Whitmore was arrogant enough to believe he could negotiate a multi-billion-dollar deal through broken German and Google Translate. The 3 investors were already uncomfortable, already questioning. One wrong translation, one cultural misstep, and this entire dinner would collapse. She'd spent 3 years learning to be invisible, learning to hear conversations people didn't know she understood. Whitmore had no idea the just a waitress spoke flawless Mandarin from 2 years posted in Beijing, perfect Arabic from 18 months in Dubai, and German refined enough to negotiate UN treaties. He'd made her invisible. Now she'd use it. Sophie returned with the wine, pouring precisely 2 ounces into Whitmore's glass for approval. He sipped without tasting, waved his hand dismissively. She filled each glass, noting details. Herr Schneider's slight tremor, Parkinson's early stage. Ms. Chen's untouched water. Control issues, wouldn't drink anything she didn't pour herself. Sheikh al-Rashid's careful positioning of his phone, recording this, legally or otherwise. To profitable partnerships, Whitmore raised his glass. The others raised theirs, but Sophie saw the hesitation. The deal was already dying. They just didn't know it yet. As she left the room, she heard Whitmore say in French, the rapid, dismissive French of someone showing off, "These people are so tedious about language, as if money doesn't translate perfectly well on its own." He'd said it, assuming no one else in the room understood, assuming the waitress was just decoration. Sophie's hand touched her locket through her uniform. 5 years ago, Marcus Whitmore had looked at Dr. Sophie Bennett and seen an obstacle to remove. Tonight, he looked at Sophie the waitress and saw nothing at all. Tomorrow night, no, tonight, that was going to change. She just had to wait for the perfect moment. And in her experience, men like Marcus Whitmore always provided one. Sophie delivered the appetizers with choreographed precision. Foie gras for Whitmore, seared scallops for Ms. Chen, lamb carpaccio for Sheikh al-Rashid, and smoked salmon for Herr Schneider. Each plate positioned exactly where it should be. Each guest served from the left, cleared from the right. She was furniture, perfectly placed furniture. Now then, Whitmore pulled out his tablet. Let's discuss the regulatory framework. The Swiss banking regulations require... He stopped, glancing at Herr Schneider's politely blank expression. Die Schweizer Bankvorschriften, Whitmore attempted, his German suddenly clumsy, textbook rather than fluent. Entschuldigung? Herr Schneider frowned. Whitmore tried again, pulling out his phone, typing into a translation app. He showed Schneider the screen. The older man's frown deepened. This says, the Swiss banking vegetables require harvest? Schneider's confusion was obvious even in accented English. I do not understand. Regulations, not vegetables. Whitmore's jaw tightened. He typed again, showed the screen to Ms. Chen. The technical infrastructure needs to integrate with our existing systems. Do you see any obstacles? Ms. Chen read the screen. Her expression went cold. Mr. Whitmore, this translation just asked if I have system pregnancy obstacles. Are you mocking me? No, that's not. Whitmore stabbed at his phone. The damn app is malfunctioning. Sophie refilled water glasses, her face professionally blank. But she saw everything. Schneider's growing irritation, Miss Chen's offense, Sheikh al-Rashid's careful silence as he observed the chaos. Whitmore switched tactics, addressing the sheikh directly in broken Arabic that made Sophie wince internally. He just asked if the sheikh's mother's camels were interested in purchasing his honor. Sheikh al-Rashid stood slowly. His voice was quiet, dangerously so. Mr. Whitmore, I came here in good faith. If you insult my family again, deliberately or through incompetence, this conversation is finished. That wasn't. Whitmore's carefully constructed composure was cracking. Sweat beaded at his hairline, his $22,000 suit suddenly looking rumpled. Please sit. We can work through this. Work through what? Ms. Chen set down her fork with a sharp click against china. You promised us a professional environment, clear communication. Instead, you've wasted our time with a phone app that doesn't understand context, idioms, or basic respect. I speak 4 languages, Whitmore snapped, his voice rising, the first time Sophie had heard him lose control. This deal is worth $2.5 billion. You're really going to walk away over translation errors? Yes, Herr Schneider said simply. He pushed back his chair. When a man asks me for $800 million but cannot be bothered to communicate clearly, he tells me he will be equally careless with my money. Sophie watched $2.5 billion evaporate in real time. The 3 investors stood, Schneider reaching for his coat, Ms. Chen already texting someone, Sheikh al-Rashid maintaining his dignified silence. Whitmore stood too, desperation replacing arrogance. Wait, please, just give me 10 minutes. I'll find someone. There has to be someone who can... His eyes swept the room wildly, landing on Sophie for the first time that night. Really landing on her. You, he pointed. Do you speak any other languages? The moment stretched. 5 years of invisibility. 3 years of serving people who never saw her face. Every day of watching her brother get sicker while she saved pennies from tips. Every night of remembering who she used to be. Dr. Sophie Bennett, Director of International Communications, United Nations Geneva, fluent in 9 languages. The woman who'd said no to Marcus Whitmore when it mattered. The woman he'd destroyed for it. Sophie set down her water pitcher. Her hands were perfectly steady now, her voice quiet but clear. I speak a few. Great, fantastic. Whitmore gestured frantically at the table. Tell them we can reschedule. Explain that I take this seriously, that we'll bring in proper interpreters. Mr. Whitmore, Sophie's tone made him stop mid-sentence. You haven't asked what languages I speak. I don't care if you speak Pig Latin, just French, Sophie said softly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. German, Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, Spanish, Japanese, Portuguese. She paused. And English, obviously. The room went silent, except for the faint music from the main dining room, a violin solo drifting through the closed door. Herr Schneider turned slowly. You speak German? Ja, fließend, Sophie replied, her accent perfect Hochdeutsch. I spent 2 years working in diplomatic translation in Berlin. Ms. Chen's eyes narrowed. Mandarin, Putonghua, Heyandonghua, Sophie answered in flawless Mandarin, then Cantonese. I specialized in technical and financial terminology. Sheikh al-Rashid stepped closer. Tao. You speak Arabic? His tone was skeptical. نعم. أتحدث العربية الفصحى والعديد من اللهجات. Sophie's Arabic was formal, precise, respectful. I worked 18 months in Dubai and 6 months in Riyadh on international communications projects. The Sheikh's eyebrows rose. Your accent is educated, formal. Where did you learn? Sophie's smile was small, controlled. From people who took language seriously, Your Excellency. Whitmore was staring at her now, really staring, his brain clearly trying to process the impossibility of his waitress speaking 9 languages, trying to understand why her voice sounded familiar, why her face, now that he actually looked at it, triggered something in his memory. Who are you? He whispered. Sophie picked up her serving tray from the sideboard, set it down on the table with deliberate force. The crystal wine glasses trembled, every eye in the room fixed on her. Right now? She met Whitmore's gaze directly, letting him see her clearly for the first time in 5 years. I'm someone who can save your $2.5 billion deal, or destroy it. Her hand moved to the locket beneath her collar, pulling it out where everyone could see, the photo of Daniel, and beside it, the small UN insignia she'd carried every day since Geneva. The question, Mr. Whitmore, is which one you deserve. The silence in the Rousseau room pressed like physical weight. Marcus Whitmore's face had gone white, his hand frozen halfway to his water glass. "Sit down," Sophie said quietly. Not a suggestion, a command. To her surprise, and perhaps his own, Whitmore sat. The three investors remained standing, watching this impossible reversal with fascination. The waitress had just given orders to a billionaire, and he'd obeyed. "Herr Schneider," Sophie turned to the Swiss banker, switching to flawless German. "You're concerned about regulatory compliance across 3 jurisdictions. Specifically, you need assurance that the Basel III capital requirements won't create liquidity issues during the merger transition period." Schneider blinked. "Yes, exactly that." Sophie addressed Ms. Chen in rapid Mandarin, her tones precise. "You're worried about intellectual property protection. Your algorithm portfolio is worth $500 million, but you've seen American companies absorb Chinese tech and leave partners with nothing. You need ironclad guarantees." Ms. Chen's expression shifted from skepticism to attention. "How did you—" "And Sheikh al-Rashid," Sophie continued in formal Arabic. "Your concern isn't money, it's reputation. You represent family interests spanning 4 generations. You need to know this partnership won't taint that legacy with the kind of corruption that's destroyed other Western ventures in the Gulf." The sheikh inclined his head slightly. "You understand correctly." Sophie turned back to Whitmore, switching to English. Her voice was cold, professional. "Your deal is dying because you treated communication like an afterthought, because you assumed your money spoke louder than their languages. Would you like me to fix this, or should I bring the check?" "Fix it." Whitmore's voice was hoarse. "Please." The please hung in the air, the first time he'd used it all night. Sophie moved to the head of the table, positioning herself where she could see all 4 participants. She pulled out her small server's notepad, but her posture had transformed. This wasn't a waitress anymore. This was someone who'd negotiated treaties. "Then let's begin properly." She looked at Whitmore. "Explain your proposal, slowly. I'll translate as we go, and I'll tell you if you're about to say something culturally offensive before you say it." For the next 40 minutes, Sophie orchestrated what should have been chaos into symphony. Whitmore spoke. She translated. Not just words, but context, adjusting phrasing for cultural nuance, catching potential insults before they landed, clarifying technical terms in 3 languages simultaneously. When Herr Schneider asked about liquidity ratios in German, she translated to English for Whitmore, then rendered his answer back in financial German that made the banker nod with approval. When Ms. Chen questioned data security protocols in Mandarin, Sophie translated the question, then Whitmore's response, adding technical terminology that demonstrated she understood both the technology and the business implications. When Sheikh al-Rashid raised concerns about ethical investment screens in Arabic, Sophie didn't just translate. She reformulated Whitmore's answer to address Islamic finance principles, saving him from accidentally proposing something haram. The investors began directing questions to Sophie instead of Whitmore. She became the center of the negotiation, the axis around which billions of dollars rotated. Her hands moved as she spoke, the unconscious gestures of someone who'd done this at the highest levels, who'd made language into a tool of precision rather than approximation. "The environmental impact assessment," Ms. Chen said in Mandarin, "needs third-party verification." Sophie translated, then added in English to Whitmore. "She's referring to the incident 5 years ago when your Indonesian plant claimed compliance but satellite data showed otherwise. She's asking if you've changed your practices, or just your PR." Whitmore flinched. "Tell her we've implemented—" "I'll tell her what's true," Sophie interrupted. "Have you actually changed your practices?" The room held its breath. "Yes," Whitmore said finally. "After the scandal, we overhauled everything. Independent auditors quarterly. Full transparency." Sophie studied his face, then translated for Ms. Chen. "He says yes. I recommend you verify independently." Ms. Chen smiled slightly. "I like her." By 9:30 p.m., the deal was back on track. Papers were being drawn up, lawyers called, meetings scheduled. The 3 investors were satisfied, not just with the terms, but with the process. "Ms. Sophie," Herr Schneider said as they prepared to leave, "you are wasted as a waitress. Have you considered a position in international finance?" "I'll think about it," Sophie replied in German. Ms. Chen handed her a business card. "Chen Tech Industries. Email me." I'm serious. Sheikh al-Rashid simply nodded with respect. You honored us tonight with your skill. They departed, leaving Sophie alone with Marcus Whitmore. He sat at the table, his Patek Philippe catching candlelight, his expensive suit rumpled now. He looked older than 52. He looked defeated. Dr. Bennett, he said quietly. So he remembered, finally. Hello, Marcus. Sophie's voice was soft, dangerous. It's been 5 years. I didn't recognize you. You look different. Sophie touched her simple uniform. Yes, that tends to happen when someone destroys your entire life. You lose weight, sleep, hope, all the things that make a person look alive. Sophie, don't. She held up one hand. You're going to want to apologize, to explain, to tell me it was just business, that you didn't mean for things to go so far. Save it. Whitmore's jaw clenched. How long have you been here? Working as a waitress? Sophie smiled without warmth. 3 years. Watching you walk past me twice before tonight. You never looked, never saw me. Not even when I served you that Bordeaux you love in October, or refilled your coffee last May. His face went even paler. You've been here 3 years. You could have, what? Confronted you? Exposed you? Sophie leaned against the table, her exhaustion suddenly visible. With what proof? You made sure I had nothing. No credibility, no reputation, no evidence anyone would believe. You were very thorough. She pulled the locket from beneath her collar, opened it. This is my brother Daniel. He's 21 now. He has leukemia. His treatment costs $180,000. I have $14,000 saved from 3 years of tips from people like you who never say thank you. Sophie closed the locket, met Whitmore's eyes. You didn't just destroy my career, Marcus. You destroyed his chance at living. I can write a check right now. Oh, you will, Sophie said softly. You absolutely will, but not yet. Whitmore frowned. What do you want? Sophie smiled. It was not a kind smile. I want those 3 investors to hear the whole story. I want them to know exactly who they're about to partner with, and then, she picked up her serving tray. We'll see if your $2.5 billion deal survives the truth. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. By the way, Marcus, your Chateau Margaux? I spit in it before I poured. She hadn't, but watching his face contort was worth the lie. Sophie didn't go home that night. She sat in the empty restaurant after closing, in the main dining room, where the chandeliers had been dimmed to a soft glow. Marcus the maître d' had asked if she was okay. She'd said yes. He'd known it was a lie, but left her alone. At 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. We need to talk. Name your price. M.W. Sophie deleted it without responding. 5 years ago, Marcus Whitmore had learned she couldn't be bought. He'd apparently forgotten the lesson. Her mind drifted back, the way it always did in the quiet hours. Back to Geneva. Back to when she'd been someone else. 5 years ago, Dr. Sophie Bennett's office at the United Nations overlooked Lake Geneva, the water impossibly blue against the Alps. She was 23 and already Director of International Communications, the youngest person to ever hold the position. Her dissertation on multilingual conflict resolution had been published in 4 languages. Diplomats twice her age requested her for sensitive negotiations. She'd been untouchable. Dr. Bennett, her assistant knocked. There's a Marcus Whitmore here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. Sophie remembered checking her watch. 4:30 p.m. She had a conference call with Beijing at 5. Give him 10 minutes. Whitmore had walked in wearing the same kind of expensive confidence he'd worn at Le Jardin. Different suit, same arrogance. He'd sat without being invited. I'll be direct, he'd said. I need you to adjust some phrasing in next week's environmental impact report, the one your team is translating for the General Assembly. Sophie had frowned. Adjust how? Nothing major. Just soften the language around industrial emission standards. Make it sound less damaging to companies currently in compliance. He'd pulled out a folder. I've marked the sections in red. She'd opened it, read through his suggested changes. Her stomach had turned cold. Mr. Whitmore, these changes would make it seem like current emission levels are acceptable. They're not. The data clearly shows. I know what the data shows. He'd leaned back, entirely comfortable. I also know my company and 6 others will face $2 billion in new compliance costs if this report goes through as written. That's jobs, Dr. Bennett. Thousands of them. and millions of tons of carbon that will continue poisoning the atmosphere. Perspective. He'd smiled. I'm willing to compensate you for your perspective adjustment. Let's say $2 million transferred to any account you choose. Sophie had stood. Get out of my office. Think about it. Whitmore hadn't moved. You're 23. Brilliant, yes, but young. $2 million could set you up for life. Help your family. I understand your younger brother has some medical issues. Get out! He'd left, but not before placing a business card on her desk. When you're ready to be realistic. Sophie had reported the attempted bribe within the hour, documented everything, filed a formal complaint. She thought she was doing the right thing. She hadn't understood how wars were actually fought at that level. The first deep fake appeared 2 weeks later, a video of Sophie Bennett at a Geneva nightclub, clearly intoxicated, discussing classified UN information with strangers. It looked real, sounded real, wasn't real. Then came the offshore bank account discovered in her name. $5 million, traced to shell companies connected to Chinese intelligence. Except she'd never opened the account, never touched the money. Then the witnesses who claimed she'd offered to sell translation services, adjusting meanings for the highest bidder. People she'd never met, with photos of meetings that had never happened, AI-generated conversations she'd never had. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months of Sophie suspended, reputation shredded, colleagues avoiding her in hallways. 3 months of watching her career implode in real time while lawyers dissected her life looking for proof of crimes she hadn't committed. They never found definitive proof of her guilt. They also never found definitive proof of her innocence. In that world, the suspicion was enough. Dr. Sophie Bennett resigned in disgrace at 23. No other institution would touch her. Her doctorate meant nothing. Her skills meant nothing. Her truth meant nothing against Marcus Whitmore's money. Present Sophie's phone buzzed again. $500,000. Final offer. Just stay quiet. MW. She typed a response. I told you 5 years ago. I can't be bought. His reply came instantly. Everyone can be bought. It's just a matter of price. Then you don't understand. I don't want your money, Marcus. I want justice. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. What does that mean? Sophie smiled in the empty restaurant. It means tomorrow night, your 3 investors are coming back for a final contract signing dinner, and I'm going to tell them everything. They won't believe you. You're a disgraced former employee. I'm a billionaire. True, Sophie typed. Except I have something you don't think I have. What? Proof. She sent him a photo, just 1 page from the folder she'd kept hidden for 5 years. The original email from Whitmore's corporate account, offering $2 million to adjust environmental terminology. Time-stamped, verified, with metadata intact. Her phone rang immediately. She didn't answer. It rang 17 more times before dawn. Sophie sat in the quiet restaurant, her brother's photo open in her locket, and felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Power. Not the power of position or credentials or reputation. The power of truth, carefully preserved, patiently guarded. Marcus Whitmore had spent 5 years thinking he'd destroyed her completely. He'd never imagined she'd spent those same 5 years waiting for exactly the right moment to destroy him back. Tomorrow night, 3 investors worth $2.5 billion would sit at her table. They'd already seen her save Whitmore's deal with skill he couldn't match. Tomorrow they'd learn why a UN director with 9 languages was serving wine in Manhattan. And then they'd have to decide, was Marcus Whitmore's word worth more than Dr. Sophie Bennett's evidence? Sophie finally stood, turned off the last light, locked the restaurant door behind her. The city was starting to wake up. Garbage trucks rumbling, early commuters emerging from subway stations, the sky lightening from black to deep blue. Somewhere in this city, Daniel was sleeping in his hospital bed. His treatment paused because she couldn't afford the next round. Somewhere, Marcus Whitmore was panicking, finally understanding he'd underestimated the woman he'd tried to erase. And Sophie Bennett, waitress, survivor, and still, despite everything, Dr. Sophie Bennett, walked home to prepare for the moment she'd been invisibly building toward for 3 years. Tomorrow night, everyone would see her clearly. Tomorrow night, the truth would cost Marcus Whitmore everything. The Russo room was set for 5 this time. Sophie had added her own place setting at the head of the table, positioned where she could see everyone clearly. No service station tonight. No invisible corner to fade into. Marcus Whitmore arrived first, 15 minutes early. His suit was immaculate as always, but Sophie saw the exhaustion underneath, the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw. A man who hadn't slept. "Sophie, please. Sit down, Marcus." She gestured to his usual chair. "They'll be here in 10 minutes.
You don't have to do this. I can make this right. The medical bills, your career. I have connections. You can sit down and be quiet." Sophie's voice was soft, deadly calm. "Or you can leave and I'll send the evidence directly to the SEC, FBI, and every major news outlet simultaneously. Your choice." He sat. Herr Schneider arrived next, precisely on time, followed by Ms. Chen and Sheikh al-Rashid.
They looked surprised to see Sophie seated at the table like an equal. But after last night, nothing about her should surprise them anymore. "Good evening," Sophie said in English, then repeated the greeting in German, Mandarin, and Arabic. "Thank you for returning. Before we finalize any agreements, there's something you need to know about the man you're about to partner with." "Sophie." Whitmore's voice held warning. "5 years ago," Sophie continued as if he hadn't spoken, "I was Dr. Sophie Bennett, Director of International Communications at the United Nations in Geneva. I was 23 years old and responsible for translating critical environmental impact reports for the General Assembly." She pulled out her old UN credentials, slid them across the table. Herr Schneider picked them up, examined them carefully. "Marcus Whitmore came to my office and offered me $2 million to alter translation phrasing in a report that would have cost his companies billions in emission compliance costs. I refused. I reported him, and he destroyed me." "That's a lie," Whitmore started. Sophie placed her phone on the table, pressed play. Whitmore's voice filled the room, tinny but clear from the recording she'd made 5 years ago. "I'm willing to compensate you for your perspective adjustment. Let's say $2 million transferred to any account you choose." Ms. Chen's expression went cold. Sophie continued, laying documents on the table one by one like playing cards. "Deep fake videos showing me drunk and discussing classified information. A fake offshore bank account in my name. Fabricated witnesses claiming I was corrupt. All of it appeared within weeks of my refusal." "Mr. Whitmore," Sheikh al-Rashid's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Is this true?" "It was a business disagreement." "A business disagreement?" Sophie's voice cracked for the first time. "You destroyed my career, my reputation, my ability to work anywhere in my field. I went from directing UN communications to serving you wine, and you didn't even recognize my face." She pulled out her locket, opened it for them to see. "This is my brother Daniel. He's 21. He has leukemia. His treatment costs $180,000. I've been working double shifts for 3 years, saving tips, and I have $14,000. Do you know why I only have $14,000, Mr. Whitmore?" Silence. "Because you took everything else, my salary, my savings, my future, my ability to help him." Her hands were shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. "I didn't want revenge. I wanted to survive. But then you walked into my restaurant, looked through me like I was furniture, and I realized you'd never changed. You'd never even thought about what you'd done to me." Herr Schneider set down the documents, removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to make a phone call." "Herr Schneider, please, now." The banker stepped out of the room. Ms. Chen was already on her tablet, fingers flying. "There's a pattern. 2019 environmental whistleblower at your Indonesian plant. Disappeared from her position, never worked in compliance again. 2021 SEC investigator who flagged your accounting practices. Suddenly under investigation himself for insider trading. Charges later dropped, but career destroyed. 2023 journalist who wrote about your labor practices in Bangladesh. Sued for defamation, spent 2 years in legal hell, newspaper retracted the story." She looked up, her expression disgusted. "You don't just silence people who challenge you. You erase them. That's business." Whitmore tried. "That's evil," Sheikh al-Rashid interrupted. "In my culture, a man's honor is everything. You have none. This partnership is finished." "Wait, please." Whitmore stood, desperation replacing arrogance. "The deal is worth $2.5 billion. You're going to throw that away over something that happened 5 years ago?" "Yes," Herr Schneider said, returning to the room. "I just spoke with my legal team. They found 6 other individuals with similar stories. You're a pattern, Mr. Whitmore. And I don't invest in patterns of corruption. Ms. Chen closed her tablet. Neither do I. Consider Chen-Tech's participation withdrawn. As is mine. Sheikh al-Rashid stood. Dr. Bennett, you honored us with your skill last night. Tonight, you honored us with your truth. Thank you. They began gathering their things. Whitmore looked between them, his face cycling through emotions. Disbelief, rage, fear. You can't just leave. We have preliminary agreements, letters of intent, which, Herr Schneider said calmly, all contained ethics clauses. You violated them long before we signed. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. Sophie watched the three of them prepare to leave, then stood. Wait, before you go, I need to ask you something. They paused. I've been out of my field for 5 years. No recent experience, a destroyed reputation, and a social media history full of lies about who I am. But I'm still the same person who negotiated your deal last night. I'm still fluent in 9 languages. I'm still skilled at what I do. She took a breath. I'm asking if any of you are willing to give me a chance. The room held its breath. Ms. Chen smiled slowly. Dr. Bennett, Chen-Tech Industries is expanding into global markets. We need a director of international communications. The position pays $450,000 annually, plus performance bonuses and full health coverage for you and your dependents. Sophie's knees almost gave out. $450,000. You saved a $2.5 billion deal last night with 30 minutes notice. I'd say you're worth it. Ms. Chen extended her hand. On one condition. You help me destroy every piece of false information about you online. I have the best tech team in the world. We'll clear your name. I'll second that offer if she declines yours, Herr Schneider added. Swiss Global Investments could use someone with her integrity, as could Al Rashid Energy Consortium, the sheikh said, though I suspect she'll accept Ms. Chen's offer. It's the most generous. Sophie looked at the three of them, investors who'd come to make billions and instead were offering her a life back. Then she looked at Marcus Whitmore, collapsed in his chair, watching his empire crumble in real time. I accept, Sophie said to Ms. Chen, but I need an advance, $180,000 for my brother's treatment. Done. I'll have it wired tonight. Ms. Chen smiled. Welcome to Chen-Tech, Dr. Bennett. As the three investors left, exchanging contact information with Sophie, Whitmore sat alone at the table. His $2.5 billion deal was dead. His partners were gone, and the woman he'd tried to erase had just been offered everything he'd stolen from her. Sophie paused at the door, looked back. Oh, and Marcus? The UN is reopening their investigation into the bribery attempt. I sent them my evidence this morning. Your lawyers should expect calls. She left him there, in the Rousseau room, surrounded by expensive wine and empty chairs. Outside, her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. How was work? Sophie smiled, tears finally coming. Good, really good. Come home tomorrow. We're going to get you that treatment. 18 months later, the boardroom on the 42nd floor of Chen-Tech Tower had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Sophie Bennett stood at the head of the conference table, addressing representatives from 12 countries in 6 different languages, switching between them as naturally as breathing. She wore a tailored navy suit, expensive but not ostentatious, and her hair was professionally styled. But around her neck, visible above her collar, hung the same silver locket she'd worn as a waitress. Some things were worth keeping. The partnership with Tokyo will require cultural sensitivity training for our entire Asia-Pacific team, she said in flawless Japanese to the executives on the video screen, then switched to English for her American colleagues. I've prepared a 3-month rollout plan that addresses both language barriers and business protocol differences. Ms. Chen, now simply Wei to Sophie, nodded approvingly from her seat. Excellent. Make it happen, Dr. Bennett. The meeting ended at noon. Sophie gathered her materials, checked her phone. 3 messages from Daniel, all photos. Him at Columbia University, where he'd just started his sophomore year, healthy and cancer-free for 14 months now. The treatments had worked. He was alive. She texted back a heart emoji, then headed to her office, a corner space with her name on the door in English and Mandarin. Her walls displayed her reissued UN credentials, her framed PhD, and a photo of her with Daniel at his college orientation, both of them grinning. Dr. Bennett? Her assistant knocked. The New York Times is here for your interview. Sophie had been declining press for over a year, but this one was different. This one was about Marcus Whitmore's sentencing. The journalist was young, maybe 25, with a recorder and careful eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to speak. I know the trial was difficult." "It was necessary," Sophie said simply. Marcus Whitmore had been sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. Bribery, witness tampering, fraud, conspiracy. The investigation Sophie had triggered had uncovered decades of corruption, not just the environmental report, but securities fraud, tax evasion, illegal campaign contributions. His $4. $7 billion empire had been liquidated to pay fines and victim restitution. He'd lost everything. "Do you feel vindicated?" the journalist asked. Sophie considered the question. "I feel like justice happened. That's different than vindication. Vindication would require those 5 years of my life back. Daniel's years of suffering erased. The other people Whitmore destroyed restored to their careers." She paused. "I got my life back, but I can't get back what was taken." "Your brother's in remission now? 14 months cancer-free." Sophie smiled. "He's studying international relations at Columbia. Wants to work for the UN someday, ironically. Because of your experience there? Despite it. Or maybe because he saw what happened when someone tried to silence truth, and he wants to be someone who protects it instead." Sophie's voice softened. "He's braver than I was at his age." The interview wrapped up 20 minutes later. Sophie walked the journalist out, then detoured through the building's main lobby. Chen Tech occupied 18 floors, employed 3,000 people in New York alone, and Sophie had helped expand their international presence to 47 countries. But her favorite part of the building was the ground floor cafe. She ordered a coffee, actually ordered it herself, no assistant required, and sat at a small table by the window. Across the street, Le Jardin Étoilé's awning was visible, the restaurant where everything had changed. She still thought about that night sometimes. The moment Whitmore had finally looked at her and actually seen her face. The moment she'd decided to stop being invisible. "Dr. Bennett?" Sophie looked up. A young woman stood beside her table, maybe 22, wearing a Chentech intern badge. She looked nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you." The intern clutched her coffee cup. "I read about your case, about what happened to you. I'm starting my career in tech, and there are already people who've tried to." She stopped, swallowed. It helps to know that speaking up doesn't always end badly, that sometimes the truth actually matters. Sophie gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down. What's your name?" "Rebecca. Rebecca Torres." "Rebecca, has someone at Chen Tech made you uncomfortable?" No. Everyone here has been great. It was my last internship. My supervisor kept..." She stopped again. "He'd make comments about my appearance. Ask me to work late when no one else was around. When I reported it, HR said I was overreacting, that I should be grateful for the opportunity." Sophie's jaw tightened. She knew that story. She'd lived that story. "What happened?" "I quit. Lost the recommendation letter I needed for graduate school. Lost the professional network. But I saw your story in the news, and Chen Tech was hiring, and I thought, maybe there are still companies that care about doing the right thing." "There are," Sophie said firmly. "And you did the right thing. Walking away when your safety is at risk isn't weakness, it's survival." Rebecca's eyes were shining. "My advisor said I threw away my future over nothing. Your advisor was wrong. You protected your future." Sophie pulled out her business card. Dr. A. Sophie Bennett, Chief Communications Officer, Chen Tech Industries. "Email me Monday. I'll write you a recommendation letter for graduate school. And if you need professional references, I know people." Rebecca took the card with shaking hands. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After she left, Sophie sat with her coffee, watching the street. How many Rebecca Torres were out there? How many people who'd spoken up and been punished for it? How many were still serving wine to people who didn't see their faces? Her phone buzzed. Wei Chen. "Board meeting moved to 3 p.m. Also, I'm promoting you to Executive VP. We'll discuss salary later, but I'm thinking $680K plus equity." Sophie stared at the message. 3 years ago, she'd been saving tips to afford her brother's medication. Now she was being offered $680,000 and stock options. But the money wasn't the point. The point was that she'd survived, that Marcus Whitmore had tried to erase her and failed. That truth, preserved carefully and deployed strategically, could actually win sometimes. She texted back, "Only if we start a mentorship program for young women in tech. Company funded. Zero tolerance policy for harassment. I want to build something that protects the next Rebecca Torres before she has to quit. Wei's response came instantly. Done. This is why I promoted you. 6 months later, Sophie stood in Le Jardin Étoilé for the first time since that night. The restaurant looked exactly the same. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, roses on every table. But she wasn't wearing a black apron anymore. Dr. Bennett, your table is ready. Marcus, the maitre d', who'd given her a hug when she'd made the reservation, led her to the Rousseau room. Daniel was already there, healthy and grinning, 22 years old with his whole life ahead of him. Also at the table, Wei Chen, Herr Schneider, Sheikh Al-Rashid, and 3 young women from Chen Tech's new mentorship program. Everyone, Sophie said, this is where I worked for 3 years. This is where I served wine to people who never said thank you. This is where I learned that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. She looked at the young women. You're going to face people who try to make you invisible, who try to convince you that your voice doesn't matter, that your truth isn't worth telling, that staying quiet is safer than speaking up. Sophie opened her locket, Daniel's photo, the UN insignia, and now a new addition, a tiny photo of Rebecca Torres at her graduate school acceptance. I'm here to tell you that sometimes staying quiet is survival, and that's okay. But when you're ready to speak, when you have evidence, support, and a strategy, your voice can change everything, she smiled. I was just a waitress for 3 years. I'll never forget what invisible feels like, and I'll spend the rest of my career making sure you never have to feel it. They raised their glasses. Sparkling water, wine, champagne. A toast to survival, to speaking up, to the invisible people who refuse to stay that way. And in a federal prison 200 miles away, Marcus Whitmore sat in a cell, finally invisible himself, learning what it meant to be overlooked, dismissed, and forgotten. Justice, Sophie had learned, didn't always come quickly, but sometimes, just sometimes, it came completely.